How's it going, everybody? I am your host, Stu Coughlin, and welcome to the Sox On 35th podcast. We are back with another exciting episode covering your Chicago White Sox. Huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring this episode. Even though there's no more baseball after the exciting World Series, there's hockey, basketball, and the NFL as well. So if you want to catch any of those games, be sure to use code SOXON35th for $20 off your first purchase. Honestly, all the Chicago teams are kind of fun right now, so it's kind of worth going to a game. Now that baseball's over and the misery's over for both Northsiders and Southsiders, go enjoy a sporting event. As always, we appreciate SeatGeek for sponsoring podcasts. And as always, I'm joined by our panelists, Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. Gentlemen, it's been a little bit. Obviously, since last time I was on this podcast, I've gotten married, and I've just had a whole bunch of stuff going on. So, got the kiddo through Halloween for the first time, so it's good to be back.
Yeah, we held down the fort for you. Welcome back, I guess, quote unquote. Not much has been going on in my life. Like we have these breakups essentially of time where we're doing things in the off season, and it's just cool. Haven't been around for a month. I'll have something exciting to share with the guys. And it's like, actually, no, this is there's nothing that's happening in baseball, so there's nothing that's happening in my life. Like I'm boring, and this is a good reminder of that as it comes around every year. So
Right. Yeah. Kind of the same on my end. I mean, it's been like a busy work season, so I've been traveling a bit, but my conference this week is in Chicago, which is fun because I don't have to travel for that, obviously. So that's a first for me. But sounds like Duke for sure is the one who has the more interesting life right now, which is fine.
You know, I've been kind of joking with a lot of my coworkers because like since I've been back to work since the wedding, I've gotten at least 10 questions. So how's it feel to be a married man? And it's like, well, I've known Kayla since high school, and we've been together for like 10 years, and we have a kid. So, yeah, not a whole lot different. I just have a cool
you were
ring on
just
my finger
signing
now.
paperwork at a certain point.
Essentially, yeah. But no, man, I mean, it's been cool. And honestly, since the wedding, I've been able to kind of put a lot more of my focus into a little bit of other stuff. Obviously baseball season's over, so that kind of sucks with the timing of that because I've been really diving headfirst into work, diving headfirst into just being a dad. And yeah, I mean it's been cool. It's been really kind of low key, chill, and I like that.
All good things. I didn't hear anything to complain about there. Get to focus on what you need to focus on, be a dad, have some fun.
Yeah. And now that I don't have to worry about, a wedding next year and hopefully not a pregnant wife, I think baseball season is going to be a lot of fun next year, boys. But speaking of which, we got a little bit to cover in this episode. Obviously, some news that the White Sox wanted to drop on us today on this beautiful Tuesday in November. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also be sure to check out the website soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at soxon35th. So just kicking it right off. Zach Bove is the new pitching coach. Matt Wise is sticking around as bullpen coach. Derek Shomon, brand new hitting coach. And Luis Robert is sticking around. Real off the cuff, real off the top of your head. Nick, how do you feel?
I feel fine. I mean, the Luis Robert thing was expected, I think, as soon as they didn't trade him at the deadline. And as for the coaching moves, I mean, to be honest with you, and I wouldn't be surprised if you both agree, I had not heard of either of these guys until earlier today. I mean, other than Matt Wise, since he was already part of the organization, but the other two I had not heard of. So everything I know about them has been from articles that I've read in the last few hours, and for that reason, I don't have the strongest opinion on these moves. In fact, I think anybody who would say these are incredible out of the park moves or these are terrible, fire everybody, like anyone saying either of those things, I feel like shouldn't really be trusted unless they actually have known about these guys in the past. In which case, good for them if that's true. So we'll get more into it, on each specific person. But I think overall, it's just a reflection of the fact that Bannister and Ryan Fuller are kind of running, hitting and pitching on each side, and these guys will probably just be reinforcing whatever it is that those two want, which is fine. That's how these things work.
I think these are phenomenal hires, and I'm just kidding. First of all, you should have known about Bove because Bove was mentioned in my pitching coach candidate article. So thanks for proving you didn't read that article, Nick. No, I think it's there were two ways when it's like, all right, you're tossing around names, people are identifying guys. Like, all right, are they going to pick someone with experience, which that's going to clash with Fuller and Bannister a little bit because those might be clashing philosophies, or are you going to get someone that kind of new to it or newer to it, probably hasn't been a lead pitching coach before, kind of just been an assistant, and then kind of mold that person that they have a certain specialty, knowing that you're putting a lot of faith in them to operate a team at the major league level day to day. And they went with the latter, and that's fine. I think Bove is a good candidate for just some very specific things that we can talk about for what his specialty is. And I think Shomon is the same way. There are certain things they don't pop up in a lot of articles, but they've popped up enough to where, okay, I can identify that this may be his specialty, this may be his specialty. And when you're looking at filling a position like this, I guess the White Sox have really made it clear. I think that's the biggest thing that's come from these moves, that Bannister and Fuller have tons and tons and tons of control. Now, to get back to previous questions we'd asked on podcasts before, successes and failures, I think that now goes a lot more towards Bannister and Fuller. You start watching those with a closer eye. That being said, at the end of the day, two strong candidates in terms of just having some sort of track record and the people they've worked with. So nothing to be, I guess, upset about, but nothing that's going to have anyone over the moon, I think is a fair way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Nick, to your point, 100% had to Google who these guys were.
I didn't read my article. Fine, thank you.
Yeah, no, that I do respect that you had to pat yourself on the back there before you got started. So I mean, kudos to you on that. I don't know, like with a lot of these types of hires, I just don't expect to get too excited about it until I actually see it in action. Especially in a game like baseball, these positions, they move so often, and unless it's like a Hall of Fame hitter or a Hall of Fame pitcher or fucking Mike Maddox, it's really hard to just kind of judge immediately how this is going to go. I remember feeling similar about Ethan Katz when we brought him in. It's like, okay, this guy, from what I've read about him, seems like he has some good ideas, but I read that with every single assistant coach hire in every sport. You know what I mean? So, I think it's a good sign that we're not hiring just former flunkies. I will say it is, of course, ironic, and it has to be brought up, the fact that the picture of him being introduced is him wearing a Royals hat. That is not lost on me. Shouldn't be lost on anybody, but as far as I know, there's not a direct connection there between Chris Getz and Zach Bove. I mean, just looking at the numbers, and I thought Joe did a pretty good job doing a write-up here to kind of announce the news. But in 2025, Royals ranked 6th in majors, 3.73 ERA, while allowing the 8th fewest home runs, as well as a kid Noah Cameron, among the MLB rookie leaders in WHIP, which is big, very big, especially with what we've seen, even with our good pitchers, probably the last 10 years. The whip number is never really all that strong. Strikeout numbers might be high, but looking at you, Dylan Cease, love you, buddy. But, I think I think there's potential here. Am I going to sit here and say this guy, just based on what he did last year with the Kansas City Royals, is going to come in here and be like a full-on savant? No. But, I don't know. I don't have anything to be angry about, I guess. I mean, once Ethan Katz was gone, whether you loved Ethan Katz or you hated him or you kind of felt in the middle about him, at the end of the day, it's a fresh start. It kind of shows that this team's going in the direction that we're trying to get new people in the building.
Yeah, I think a couple things on that you mentioned are important. Number one, maybe not a savant by any means, but clearly brought in for a very specific thing. What's been written about both Bove and Shomon. Bove is heavy into pitch design and the biomechanics. Like that must have been something that, when Bannister assessed whether it's a relationship with Katz or Katz's skill set, that was lacking. Cool, fine, whatever. And on the flip side, Showman worked with with the Twins. He worked with the Blue Jays' current hitting coach, which is kind of important because he's been making waves recently because of what the Blue Jays did, going from worst in the AL East to the doorstep of a World Series they should have won. We don't have to get into that.
Rest in peace to the Blue Jays. That was really tough.
Really tough, especially when you should have won. That being said,
and especially when both countries are rooting against the LA Dodgers.
Right. Like there was nobody really rooting for LA there. Regardless, the point being his was more about, the talk was both swing decisions in Toronto as well as just bat speed and things like that, a little bit more advanced. So both of those have very specific things they've been known or written about to be good at. All right, so maybe that just complements what Bannister and Fuller are doing. Maybe that's what they find most important to the major league level. Cool. I think that's nice that they've identified guys that have a specific skill set that they're looking for. But at the same time, it comes back to this for me. It's like you hired people without experience. So you're making it clear you're the guy in charge. Like we're not going to blame Zach Bove when Sean Burke doesn't take a step forward next year. We're not going to blame Derek Showman when, Colson Montgomery goes through a sophomore slump. That's going back up top.
Do you know White Sox Twitter?
Well, see, here's the thing. Let's establish it early on. Fair point, but let's establish it now before we do the same stupid arguments that we do every time. A lot like with Thames, it was a little bit different because he had experience. Katz did not. So it's a little bit harder to do that. These are two guys completely inexperienced as lead pitching coaches. You cannot make an argument that they're the guy in charge of things or, when things are good, it's this guy. When things are bad, it's that guy. The same stupid shit we've been talking about. Like, you can't do that anymore. The Sox made that clear, and I think it's a good thing simply because it doesn't disrupt a chain of command, but it's also a bad thing for anyone who wants to try and scapegoat individuals.
Yeah, no, it is a good thing for us as fans, right? We always say we want accountability. And to your point, Jordan, now we know that Bannister and Fuller, I was about to say Katz, Bannister and Fuller are the ones who should be held accountable if things go wrong, or should be praised if things go right. Not to say that the pitching coach and hitting coaches are just figureheads, that they still matter, obviously, and it still requires a skill set to translate, this coaching talk into language that players will understand and act on. But it's not their philosophies. And to your point that you brought up about what they do in particular, it's hard for me to say, right? Because if Bove is like the biomechanics guy, that's great. And I don't know what Ethan Katz did or didn't do in that arena, right? It's hard for us as outsiders to say whether Katz was good in that area or not. And for swing decisions for the hitting side of things, I mean, the one thing I will give to this 2025 White Sox team compared to the prior year, I believe Marcus Thames was there both years, but the swing decisions I thought were much, much better this year compared to last, and not just because they had new players. And it wasn't just like Teal, Mydroth, etc. Even guys who were here both seasons, or the Mike Talkmans of the world who weren't here but are not like the centerpieces of the future. I was impressed by all of their swing decisions this year. So I'm not saying that Tim deserved to keep his job or that this is a bad decision or anything. I'm just saying that it's interesting to me that was this guy's calling card, because I didn't necessarily think that was an issue with last year's team.
That's an interesting point. I didn't consider it that way, but that is something we've talked about before, where it's, the swing decisions were better this year. There's no way around that. So that is interesting. It's hard when you make these sorts of decisions. Like, did Tim's just want more control? Did Katz just want more control? I don't know. This is where it gets hard, because that's a great counterpoint. It's like, these are the specialties that the other guys were lacking. Well, the numbers would say otherwise. So hold on a second there. I don't know. That's tougher than I give it credit for. And it's a good point. I think at the same time, though, it's At the very least, you're establishing the baseline of, I'm in charge, this is my philosophy. Get in line, for lack of a better term, or be comfortable with getting in line. And I mean, that sounds a little harsh, but it's still the idea of, hey, you can add your new ideas, but at the end of the day, this is my job. This is my philosophy. We're working with that.
Yeah, well, and I think with Nick, you brought up a really good point about talking about the approach this season, and just getting all the small things right. I think that was a big point of emphasis going into this past year, especially with how young the team is. And I think that's the direction we need to continue to go in. So if that's something that Derek Shomon brings to the table, ideally that's what you want with a team that still has developing bats in the lineup. We're not in a situation where we don't know if Colson Montgomery right now is going to be a power hitter, contact hitter, a mix of both. You know what I mean? Like there's still so many guys in this lineup where we don't know what their full hitting profile is going to be. So getting everything down at the base level and getting the approach is like a number one. And it felt like when we had more specialized, more seasoned, more veteran guys, we were trying to aim at, like, say, the Greg Walkers of past. This guy wants you to just absolutely hit bombs. He wants you to hit it all over the field. Then with the La Russa era, we had a lot of guys that had a high on base percentage. So ideally we were trying to go for walks with the occasional home run. You know what I mean? We kind of had our guys in the lineup, but we were trying to get as many walks to get as many guys on base for those big power hitters. We're in a situation where we don't need to do either of those things. We don't want to focus on one or the other because, and this sounds really weird to say, but like winning a baseball game by getting guys on base and, hitting a bomb or just hitting like 4 home runs doesn't really do us a ton of help in the long run going into next year. We need to be able to have a full approach from these guys so they can continue to grow as baseball players. And then once we finally see their profile go, if we have more power hitters in the lineup, then we can start kind of focusing more on that being the priority of what we want to do. So I think a lot of it's going to be philosophy. I'm not sure if that's where, Getz and company kind of already have a philosophy in mind, and maybe that's why they don't feel too nervous about moving to another hitting coach because they think they're just going to move that right direction. I don't know. It's purely speculation until we can see it, until we can really hear these guys talk at spring training about what they're seeing from these players. But overall, I mean, I said it a while ago. I can't remember like a podcast. I can't put a date on it, but I wanted this White Sox team to build their own culture by bringing in people from around the league, not necessarily just trying to become the next Rays or become the next Red Sox or become the next, Dodgers or anything like that, just by basically trying to take all their lower level executives and lower level, coaching staff from all those teams, because all you're going to do is get like a watered down product of what they already are. But when you go out there and build your own culture like these teams did, that's why they get the results that they do. Except for Boston as of late, but I don't feel bad for Boston. They've won enough. So regardless, whether it works or not, I like the idea of bringing in different guys around the league and not just strictly going to like the Kansas City freaking pipeline. I know that sounds incredibly hypocritical with Bove, but still, like the fact that we're not just hiring yes men, I like that.
Well, no, it's not Bove. There's no connection there. There's no overlap. Bove was brought in when they brought Quatraro in, so that was a really good hire. That was a manager that I wanted the White Sox to consider at that time. And he was brought in at that time. So there's no connection. I think that's dumb if Sox fans want to say that, to your point, Duke.
I think it's going to happen just naturally because he has a Kansas City Royals hat.
Right, but people need to do 10 seconds of research is kind of my point.
That's a tall ask, brother.
Yeah, I know, but still, it's in the article. If you want to read the news article, it's outlined there too. Regardless, your point about kind of different names, what I was also surprised by, Chris Getz had a pattern of bringing guys in with previous playing experience. Venable, he kept Sizemore around. Barfield, totally blanked out his name for a second. Josh Barfield. Neither of these guys have professional playing experience. That's, I think, what I actually like the most, because it feels like it straddled the line well between I was concerned there was almost too much of a bias where you had to have former playing experience to be in a position of control with Chris Getz at the helm. And this very much proved no, whether or not he has major league experience, or even professional experience or not. Neither of these guys played baseball at a very high level. And that's not a knock at them, but I think it's more of a reassuring thing of, hey, they are here because they clearly impressed Chris Getz in the interview without having to be former players. There's not a lot of overlap for either of them, or any overlap for either of them, in terms of either Getz or Bannister or Fuller. So either they became known, or like someone knew someone who recommended these guys, or whatever, they heard the right things from them. I think that general idea of, to your point, picking different guys that aren't the same run of the mill ones, both young, both up and coming, just like the rest of the team. I think that is a big part of setting the culture. It doesn't have to be, oh, this guy with professional experience and this and this and this. That's helpful. That's good. I'm not knocking it. But I'm saying that when you're creating that culture that you're talking about, I think that's one thing I really like. Two guys who really had to work to where they get, and I kind of like discredit them or be like they're just going to be the yes men or the soldiers, the foot soldiers of Bannister and Fuller. They're not. Like they clearly deserved to be in these positions, and I think that speaks to that culture of, hey, guys who worked hard to get here, guys who grinded and didn't even have the professional experience to fall back on. I think that's kind of cool too when you're talking about that culture piece.
Well, I think when, and I guess just kind of wrap up the whole point here is when you hire different people around the league to kind of bring them together, it's not a situation where they're coming in and they're told like, this is the culture, this is what you need to be able to come into. It's, let's create the culture. Like, let's create this. You know what I mean? Like, we tore it down we tore it down at the studs. You know what I mean? Like, this was the way that you wanted this to go. This is how all of these other teams get built. You know what I mean? Like, think back to like when the Houston Astros like started to really kind of make a run, like not the whole trash can thing, but like the actual like building rosters and, building a coaching staff and building a front office. It wasn't just mainstays. You know what I mean? Like, the Astros had to completely tear it down, and they started new. They brought people in from all around Major League Baseball, and they built one of the strongest front offices in baseball. I think that's the way you need to do it in this current day and age. The whole boys club idea of, hiring, and I'll admit that I would always give him a chance, but it's like wanting to hire AJ Przinsky at manager, Frank Thomas at hitting coach, Mark Burley at pitching coach. You know what I mean? Like,
I think I have a tweet that makes fun of that exact idea somewhere. I'd have to go find it.
I mean, dude, if that were to happen, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But like at the same time, it's like that's not how you build a coaching staff. You build a coaching staff, people who've just been around the game. And, there's something to be said about, some of the best coaches in across sports. They really weren't that great when they played. That either they were like, college football, they were maybe on a national championship team. Nobody knew who the fuck they were. Baseball, it's, this guy was a backup catcher for 7 years, or he never even made the show. So I think I don't want to like sit here and just make any bold statements that this is like how this is going, and the White Sox are the new frickin' Tampa Bay Rays or anything like that. This is kind of the path that I thought that we should take, and it seems like we're kind of sticking to that. So, hopefully we don't have like, Tony La Russa popping in, out of retirement to just manage, I got one more in me, like I want to continue on this road of having a bunch of young guys too, young guys in the sense of baseball, being able to come in, prove themselves, and build a culture instead of coming in and deciding they have to integrate to a culture.
I think that's the most important part is, you have a chance now to really set the deck how you want. You have a manager going into their second year. You'll have hitting and pitching coach doing it for the first time. It feels like a good shift towards exactly that. Let's truly reshift how we think about things in this organization. My longest held belief is the idea that if you're too good at something, you can't teach it well. Like it's the whole Barry Bonds failing at being a hitting coach idea. Like he was just so good at it. Like that's just natural skill. It's hard to teach that. I think those who really had to work to get where they were and adapt and not only prove it that they know shit, but prove to the players that they belong. There are some quotes in that article, our news article, about just both of these guys and their connections to players. And I think that speaks volumes too, because, there's probably a stigma around the league. I can probably guarantee it of, oh, if this guy wasn't a pro, what does he know? For them to do that, it speaks to the culture piece overall. And, it's going to be unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of talk of culture this year and seeing what internal developments happen because of what Chris Getz came out and said today, where it's like, yeah, free agency is an avenue. People explore it. We might explore it, but also there's this potential lockout looming. But free agency is an avenue, and it is something that we are aware of. It is kind of what I got from that. And I guess it kind of signals there's going to be a lot of selling of the young guys coming up, whether it's the players or the coaches, even at this point, too, while they have the lockout loom that the Blue Jays could have helped prevent, according to everybody, which the Blue Jays should have won that series. I want to be abundantly clear, regardless.
Yeah, I thought the Getz quote was funny because he's the polar opposite of Rick Hahn when he's trying to deflect from a question. Like Getz is like, yeah, free agency exists. Like we're like, okay, thanks, Chris, great observation. Whereas Rick Hahn would like wax on for like 20 years about like how his thoughts on free agency and how it's such a great concept and how there are a multitude of ways, blah blah blah. Anyway, I think you're right that for better, you're both right that for better or worse, things are set up now where depending on how this team is looking next, maybe as early as June, we'll have a good sense of what they want the team to look like from an identity standpoint. And we'll know what, if any, differences these new coaches are making, not in terms of like player performance, because it's hard to attribute that to a coach, but more so like the little things this team is doing. I know we've already talked about swing decisions and how, we all thought that was actually decent this year, but if that gets even better, obviously that would be great. One thing that would really, really get us excited, I think, is if Luis Robert, of all people, changes his plate approach, because that's something that throughout all these hitting coaches, he's always struggled with the low and away sliders. And, that's assuming he's on the roster to start the season, of course. But if he is, that would really be an intriguing development as well.
We just need to ask Chris Getz that question, because at some point he's going to answer. What I've noticed with Getz is kind of what you alluded to, Nick. He's very straightforward right away. And he's like, oh shit, I'm a GM now. I can't just be saying that. So let me ramble on for another couple of minutes and hope everybody forgot what I said first. Because if you look at like the tweets from Merkin, where it's like free agency is an avenue and it's a little premature because of this, he has like 4 more tweets after that. And it's like, all the context you needed was in the first one. Like, what did he possibly say after that? He's like trying to catch himself. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you thought the White Sox were going out and signing a big contract, like in that case, I got a elevator pass and a 2-store or in a ranch apartment to sell you. Like that is what it is. Like it wasn't going to be a thing, and I don't know. At the very least, we can look at it and say that they're going to find ways to keep fans intrigued with different narratives for another season. I think that even echoes back to what Brooks Boyer said when we interviewed him way back when. It's like, hey, we got to get people to like these young guys, because guess what? That's kind of the story for a little bit. And with the lockout looming, they'll probably milk it for all it's got for one more season. So is what it is, but doesn't take away from. I think these are solid hires. Like I'm not mad about them, not frustrated with them. Like we might hate them in 3-4 years, but at least I don't think we can look and be like, oh, I told you so. This was so bad, and look at how it went.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all covered it fairly well. I do just I want to say I just want to be devil's advocate for the absolute sake of it for anyone who might clip and take this out of context that we're just like hyping up that like we're building a culture. The, these things can go south so fast if some of these guys are the wrong hires. So like you always have to keep that in mind. Um, Also, I do like the point about Getz about kind of going on a little bit of a tangent to kind of catch himself. I actually saw this during the NFL trade deadline today because I have tweet notifications from like the NFL insiders and stuff like that to always keep up. And sprinkled in these, because obviously the Bears did nothing. They weren't going to do anything because Ryan Poles is something. I'm going to be polite, but um in between like these like three tweets of like trades, there'd be a Chicago Bears tweet, and it'd be like talking to Colson Loveland about coming to Chicago, and then there'd be like another 6 tweets, all just different trades and stuff like that, players the Bears could definitely use. Then it's like alternate angle of Caleb Williams on Sunday, and it's like you guys are really trying to play PR right now, and that's I think that honestly is kind of similar in a tweet sense to what Chris Getz does, because you're absolutely right. He does that all the time. He says something, or he starts to say something, you think he's going to go in a direction, and then he just starts firing off for a minute. You're like, oh yeah, okay, yep, he was gonna, but in all honesty, I guess my only big thoughts on the whole free agency thing, and I will keep it short, is unless there is a scenario where there is a guy out there that you just are absolutely in love with, that you think will just help elevate this team long term, what there's no point in us just going out there and spending on like 3 chunk players that are just kind of probably entering or exiting their prime, and they're not going to be non-factors by this time this team would potentially be competitive anyway. So I don't want them to go out there just to spend. I would take some strategic signings, or if there's a bell of the ball out there, you know what I mean, that some team let this guy go to free agency and test his market, and you think in some scenario you can convince this guy to come over, at least go talk to him. You know what I mean? At least bring him in. Have the graphics manager at the rate put him in, Photoshop him in a White Sox jersey and give him a freaking tour. You know what I mean? At least get people a little excited. When it doesn't work out, because we know it won't, don't pull the Kenny Williams sitting sad in the golf cart. Okay, we can't handle that again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as you were describing this, I was like, yeah, because that's worked so many times for them before.
Well, listen, Brooks, if you're listening, if you are a fan, that is a way to get people a little excited. I mean, it's gonna, might be a little bit of a bait and switch, but it'll be like, well, we're starting to host guys, and if this team and these young players start taking off, maybe, I don't know, I'd probably go to like half an extra game a year.
All I can think about is the time when the Sox, like, they tweeted something, or someone tweeted something about like, oh, they tried to trade for Shohei Ohtani. That's what I'm thinking about as you're describing this, where it's like, yeah, you tried. Like, hey, thanks for it's Bart Simpson meme. It's like, sorry, something I tried, or thanks for trying, or whatever it is. Same idea, but
listen,
I get what you're saying. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm playing devil's advocate to your devil's advocate, to be fair. Your point is well taken, though. So,
all right, I that's all the White Sox talk I can handle, boys. I'm sorry. I think we're done here. It's definitely the slower time of the year now. Hopefully things start kind of heating up around spring train or winter meetings, and maybe some discussions. I kind of want to see who hits the free agent market, and I want to see who potentially becomes available. Inevitably, one of these teams that are just on the cusp of the playoffs every year and never win, they're gonna try to tear it down. Who's going to be available? So until that stuff starts to happen, unfortunately, we have to watch Fanatics commercials about buying LA Dodgers World Series t-shirts, and it's football, hockey, baseball season, or basketball season. Jeez. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have this week for the Sox on 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website, soxon35th.com, if I can talk, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Sox on 35th. Stay up to date with Chicago White Sox. Remember to use code Sox on 35th for $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek to go see Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks. This has been Duke Coughlin, joined as always by Jordan Lazowski and Nik Gaur. We'll be back soon as we cover more White Sox baseball. Thank you, and go Sox.
Go Sox.